You've probably noticed it. Maybe in yourself, maybe in someone close to you. That person who's always healing, always processing, always doing the inner work. Their entire identity has become a rotating cast of wellness practices, journaling prompts at breakfast, boundary-setting exercises at lunch, shadow work before bed. They can tell you about their attachment style, their nervous system dysregulation, their inner child wounds. They speak the language of therapy with native fluency, and yet, somehow, nothing in their actual life ever seems to change. They're not getting better. They're getting comfortable with not getting better. It's a strange thing to witness, because on the surface, it looks like growth. It sounds like self-awareness. They're doing everything right, aren't they? Reading the books, following the accounts, attending the workshops. But if you look closer, if you're willing to see it, you might notice that all this healing has become a very sophisticated way of never actually having to face anything difficult. The therapy speak isn't a bridge to a different life. It's a place to live. And here's the uncomfortable part. Our culture has made this not just acceptable, but virtuous. We've turned avoidance into a spiritual practice and called it self-care. So what's actually happening here? Why does the pursuit of healing sometimes become the very thing that keeps us stuck? Let's start with the person who's turned their trauma into a full-time job. Every conversation somehow loops back to their childhood, their toxic ex, their emotionally unavailable parent. They've done the therapy, read the memoirs, understand the patterns. They can explain, in intricate detail, exactly why they are the way they are. And in that explanation, they've found something unexpected. Permission. Permission to stay exactly where they are. Because if you understand why you're broken, you don't actually have to fix it. You just have to keep understanding it, over and over, in slightly different ways. There's a strange comfort in this, in being the wounded one, in having a story that explains everything. It gives shape to the shapeless anxiety of simply being alive. It transforms ordinary struggles into meaningful suffering, and meaning, even painful meaning, feels better than randomness, better than the possibility that maybe you're not damaged in some special way. Maybe you're just afraid. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. At some point, your healing became your hiding place. Then there's the boundary evangelist. They've discovered that magical word, boundaries, and suddenly, every uncomfortable situation is a violation. Every request is an imposition. Every expectation is toxic. They've learned that it's okay to say no, which is true, but they've turned it into an ideology. No becomes a reflex, not a choice. They're not protecting their energy anymore. They're hoarding it. They've confused having boundaries with building walls, and now they're alone behind them, calling it peace. And look, boundaries are necessary. Of course they are. But sometimes what we call a boundary is just fear dressed up in therapy language. Sometimes, I need space means I don't want to be uncomfortable. Sometimes, that doesn't serve me means I don't want to grow. The language of wellness has given us a way to dress up our avoidance in the clothing of self-respect. We can reject anything difficult and call it self-love. We can abandon anything that challenges us and call it honoring our truth. But truth is rarely that convenient. There's another version of this, the perpetual reinventor. They're always in a season of transformation, always shedding their old self, always beginning again. New routines, new rituals, new versions of themselves that last about 6 weeks before the next reinvention begins. And they'll tell you this is growth. This is evolution. But if you've known them for years, you might notice something. The scenery changes, but the plot never does. They're not actually transforming. They're just rearranging the same furniture in the same room and calling it a new house. Because real transformation is boring. It's doing the same uncomfortable thing every day until it becomes less uncomfortable. It's not a journey or a season. It's just showing up. But showing up doesn't feel like healing. It doesn't give you that rush of new possibility. So instead, we collect new identities like they're going to save us. We chase the feeling of transformation without ever actually being transformed. Here's where it gets interesting though. Underneath all these patterns, the endless processing, the protective boundaries, the constant reinvention, there's something quieter happening, something we're all trying very hard not to look at. We've become terrified of regular unhappiness, not trauma, not crisis, just the ordinary, inevitable discomfort of being a person in the world, the awkwardness of social situations, the friction of relationships, the disappointment of unmet expectations, the slow, unglamorous work of building a life. These things aren't pathological. They're not symptoms of a deeper wound. They're just life, but we've medicalized them. We've turned normal human struggle into something that needs to be healed, processed, worked through with specialized tools and expert guidance. And in doing so, we've created this strange paradox. The more we focus on healing, the more fragile we become. The more we learn to identify our triggers, the more things trigger us. The more we protect our peace, the easier it is to lose it. We've become so attuned to our own inner landscape that we can't handle the weather anymore. The self-help industry has figured this out, of course. It's brilliant, really. Sell people the idea that they're broken, then sell them an endless stream of products to fix the brokenness. But make sure the products never quite work. Make sure there's always another layer to unpack, another wound to heal, another version of yourself to become. Keep them in the process, because people in the process keep buying things. People who actually get better move on. But here's the part that's hard to admit. Sometimes we prefer the process, because the process feels like progress without requiring any actual risk. You can journal about your fear of intimacy without ever actually being intimate. You can set boundaries without ever learning to be vulnerable within them. You can understand your patterns without ever breaking them. The healing becomes a performance of change that protects you from having to actually change. And maybe that's the hidden through line here. Maybe all of this, the trauma talk, the boundaries, the constant transformation, is just control dressed up as surrender. We've found a way to feel like we're doing the work while maintaining absolute control over our inner world. We curate our triggers, manage our energy, protect our peace. We've turned our psyche into a garden we tend obsessively, pulling out anything that doesn't belong, anything wild or unpredictable or uncomfortable. But life isn't a garden, and you can't control your way to wholeness. Remember that person from the beginning? The one who's always healing, always processing, but never actually changing. Maybe you recognize them. Maybe you recognized yourself. Here's what I think is actually happening. They're not afraid of being broken. They're afraid of being ordinary. Afraid that if they stop identifying as wounded, stop performing their healing, stop curating their growth, they'll just be regular. Another person muddling through. No special story, no meaningful struggle. Just someone trying to figure it out like everyone else. And that, somehow, feels worse than staying stuck. So they stay in the comfort cult, where healing is always happening, but never quite complete. Where self-awareness becomes a substitute for action. Where understanding replaces changing. It's not a bad place to live, really. It's safe. It's validating. It's full of people who speak the same language, who understand your journey, who will never ask you to actually take the risk of living differently. But you might want to ask yourself, what are you healing toward? Is it a life that's bigger, riskier, more uncomfortable in all the ways that matter? Or is it just a more sophisticated version of hiding? Because here's the thing, nobody wants to tell you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop healing and start living. Stop processing and start acting. Stop understanding yourself and start surprising yourself. Maybe you don't need another boundary. Maybe you need to let someone in. Maybe you don't need more inner work. Maybe you need outer work, the messy, imperfect work of actually showing up in the world. Maybe your healing has become the very thing keeping you from the life you say you want. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. But if something in this made you uncomfortable, if something here felt a little too close, you might want to sit with that. Not process it, not journal about it. Just sit with it and see what happens when you stop healing long enough to notice what you're avoiding.